Scarborough Shoal has long stood as one of the most volatile flashpoints in the South China Sea, a place where Philippine sovereignty, Chinese assertiveness, and international law intersect in a combustible mix. For more than a decade, the shoal, lying just 220 kilometers off Luzon, has been a stage for confrontation between Philippine fishermen, China's Coast Guard, and maritime militia forces. Until recently, the Philippine Navy lacked the ability to project credible naval power there, relying instead on lightly armed Coast Guard vessels and diplomatic protests. But with the arrival of its new backbone fleet, 4 modern frigates, including the Batch 2 ships BRP Miguel Malvar and the soon-to-be-delivered BRP Diego Silang, the Philippines is on the cusp of changing this equation. The question is whether this new capability will be enough to protect Scarborough and to deter further encroachment. To understand why Scarborough matters so much, one must recognize both its geography and symbolism. Geographically, the shoal is a triangular atoll with rich fishing grounds and a natural lagoon, making it economically valuable for Filipino fishermen. Militarily, it sits at the gateway to the Luzon Strait and the deep waters of the Philippine Sea, making it a potential staging ground for naval operations. Control of Scarborough would allow any power to monitor and influence traffic through a vital maritime artery. For China, its occupation of the shoal since 2012 has been a way to press its 9-line claim. For the Philippines, maintaining presence there is about upholding both sovereignty and dignity. Until recently, Manila's presence at Scarborough was largely symbolic. The Philippine Coast Guard dispatched patrols, often outnumbered and outgunned by much larger Chinese Coast Guard vessels. The Navy rarely risked its limited assets in the area because it lacked the capability to sustain itself under the shadow of Chinese naval and air power. Any confrontation highlighted the asymmetry, a handful of lightly armed Philippine vessels facing an armada of Chinese ships backed by Beijing's modern fleet and militarized outposts in the Spratly Islands. It was a lopsided equation, and one that Manila could only offset through reliance on allies, especially the United States. The commissioning of BRP Miguel Malvar in May 2025 and the expected delivery of BRP Diego Silang by early 2026 begins to change this dynamic. Alongside the 2 Jose Rizal-class frigates already in service, these new vessels form what analysts call the backbone fleet of the Philippine Navy. The difference is not just in numbers, but in quality. The Batch 2 ships introduce advanced AESA radars, vertical launch systems for medium-range surface-to-air missiles, and stronger anti-submarine capabilities. For the first time in its history, the Philippine Navy possesses ships that can offer area air defense rather than merely defending themselves. That means a frigate positioned near Scarborough could shield Coast Guard vessels, supply ships, or even fishing fleets from aerial threats, extending the Philippine protective umbrella further out to sea. In practical terms, a pair of modern frigates operating together changes the risk calculus for Beijing. While China retains overwhelming superiority in numbers, the presence of Philippine warships with credible air defense and anti-ship strike capability raises the costs of coercion. The ability to detect, track, and, if necessary, engage hostile aircraft or ships alters the balance. It may not stop China from acting, but it complicates their operational planning and forces them to consider the risks of escalation. For the Philippines, this is the essence of deterrence, not to match China ship for ship, but to make harassment and coercion more dangerous. Scarborough is also the place where allies are watching closely. In September 2025, the Philippines joined with Australia and Canada in a joint air defense drill near the shoal, one of the largest trilateral exercises of its kind. The exercise simulated aerial threats and tested coordination between warships and aircraft, sending a clear message that Scarborough is not only a Philippine concern, but part of a wider Allied security architecture. With the Backbone Fleet, Manila is no longer just a junior partner in such exercises. It brings credible assets to the table. This raises the value of alliance commitments and strengthens Manila's diplomatic leverage. Yet it would be naive to suggest that 4 frigates solve the Scarborough problem. China's Coast Guard and maritime militia operate dozens of large ships in the area, often in swarms. Its navy can dispatch destroyers, frigates, and aircraft from Hainan or its artificial islands in the Spratlys. Against such weight, 4 Philippine frigates remain a small force. They can create presence, they can impose costs, but they cannot guarantee control. The Philippines will still depend heavily on allies for surveillance, intelligence, and reinforcement in a crisis. The symbolic power, however, should not be underestimated. When a Philippine frigate with advanced sensors and weapons steams into Scarborough waters, it demonstrates to both domestic and international audiences that Manila is no longer powerless. It tells Filipino fishermen that their navy now has the means to stand with them. It signals to Beijing that Manila is willing to contest the shoal not only with words but with steel. And it reminds allies that the Philippines is serious about contributing to collective defense. These are intangible but critical shifts. Looking forward, the deployment of the Backbone Fleet to Scarborough raises the broader question of sufficiency. Is 4 enough? Most analysts agree it is not. Covering Scarborough, 2nd Thomas Shoal, Reed Bank, and other contested areas requires more hulls. Maintenance cycles and training commitments mean that at any given time, only a fraction of the fleet is available for deployment. This is why attention is turning toward Horizon 3 modernization and the possibility of Batch 3 frigates. Manila may need to add 2 to 4 more warships, or even consider moving up to light destroyers if it is to sustain continuous presence across its maritime zones. Scarborough may be the immediate test, but it also highlights the need for long-term force expansion. The Backbone Fleet thus represents both an end and a beginning. It ends the era in which the Philippine Navy could be dismissed as a symbolic force incapable of real combat power. It begins an era in which Manila can credibly contest areas like Scarborough, complicating Chinese plans and reassuring allies. But it is also a reminder of the journey still ahead. The Navy has built a backbone, but whether that backbone can carry the weight of defending a vast archipelago against one of the world's largest navies is another matter. In the end, Scarborough will be the litmus test. When the Diego Silang joins the Miguel Malvar, the Philippines will have the means to conduct sustained, credible operations at the shoal for the first time. Whether this presence deters, escalates, or stabilizes the situation will shape not only the future of the West Philippine Sea, but also the trajectory of Philippine naval modernization. What is certain is that Manila now has tools it lacked before, and with those tools comes responsibility. To use them wisely, to coordinate with allies, and to plan for what comes next. So the question stands, will 4 modern frigates be enough to hold the line at Scarborough, Or is this only the foundation for a larger fleet yet to come? The answer will define the Philippine Navy's path to 2030, and perhaps the balance of power in the South China Sea itself.